Welcome, everyone, to our second Keeping It Real conversation. Tonight, we're speaking with Alexa Orban. This conversation is closed caption enabled, and I've turned on transcription. For additional accessibility, I'll share a visual description of myself. I'm a white woman with dark brown chin-length hair that's down and brown eyes. I'm wearing large blue-green glasses and a royal blue short-sleeve shirt. Sometimes I may look like my eyes are looking away from the screen or like they're rolling, but that's part of my cerebral palsy. I'm Jocelyn Cohen, Vice President of Communications and Engagement with Cerebral Palsy Alliance Research Foundation, also known as CPARF, and I'm based in New York City. At CPARF, we focus on funding research and innovation to bring science to life for people with cerebral palsy. We started our Keeping It Real blog series about 3 years ago now, and I'm thrilled that it continues to spur and foster conversations like the one we're going to have with Alexa tonight. She's a motivational influencer, creating an inclusive community for women. She understands that stories bring people together, and she hopes to empower and inform others by sharing her personal experiences with cerebral palsy. She earned her BA from Quinnipiac University, and she currently serves as the Senior Manager of Communications at a mental health startup organization. Welcome, Alexa. Welcome to the Zoom room.
Hi, Jocelyn. So great to see you, and I'm so honored to be on tonight.
We're really glad to have you, as I said. So to kick things off, would you mind sharing a little bit of your life story in a nutshell for the folks here?
Yeah, of course. Always the easiest thing to do is sum up your life in just a minute. But I was born and raised in Connecticut. And, for me, my journey started with cerebral palsy when I was young. But at first, as a child, I didn't really know. So some of my favorite hobbies growing up were dancing, swimming, which turned into diving. And I also found horseback riding. So those were some of my favorite things. Through college, I also found a love for Italy and for cooking. And that led me into starting to create and starting to post on social media and realizing that social media can just reach so many people. And at the time, my content was more influencer focused. And now, of course, that's changed a lot to sharing my story with cerebral palsy. But I loved to just share what I was up to, my travels, my recipes. And now I get to create for myself and for so many women out there who just need that motivation. And it's just been such a journey to get where I am today. And 27 years. When I left college, if you asked me where I would end up, it probably wouldn't have been where I am today. But I think that that's something that's amazing about life is we have to think about it as a journey, and we have to think about all the strides that we make to get to where we are. So I can say that I'm proud of where I am today, but there's definitely things that I'll do to keep going and growing.
That's all great. And you brought up a few things that you discovered while you were growing up that I want to touch on a little bit. You said that you did diving and horseback riding. And I know that a lot of young kids with CP do hippotherapy, which is, being on horseback. Did you find that helped with your CP? And then just separately, I'm fascinated by the whole diving thing. So if you could go a little bit into that and what your process was, that would be great.
Yeah, of course. So horseback riding, it was something that my mom always loved. And I don't even think she knew exactly how much it would help me with my CP. Because, with the flexion of your foot, I don't have that much movement. So I can't wiggle my toes. It's very hard to have movement. And when you are riding a horse as a normal horseback rider, both of your heels need to be down in order to maintain that stability on the horse. So even still today, when I ride, something that's very frustrating is my foot will slip up and I can't do anything about it. I've just learned, to make the changes. When I get on or off the horse, I have a special way I throw my stirrup on my foot. But it did definitely help with strengthening because you don't realize how much core strength you need and how much leg strength, and also just keeping your body balanced. But what I also thought was so great about horseback riding is the horse is like the extra legs for you, right? So you get that speed, you get that agility, and it's that adrenaline rush for you. So that was the biggest thing with horseback riding. But what I love about horseback riding, and what I did when I was actually a horseback riding instructor for summer camp, was we worked with a lot of kids with mental disabilities too. And so you can see just the therapeutic aspect of horses overall. Even if you physically can't get on a horse, there's something just about being in their presence and just petting them and maybe brushing them. And I've seen the therapeutic value, like you said, in so many ways. So I think that they're just something that God or the universe gave us that is just so great to have, because there's a connection, and that's something that's just undeniable between horses and humans. So
Mhm.
I am really blessed that I found them, and it was just so amazing for me growing up to have them.
Yeah, and I've experienced that whole core strength. I know that everyone with CP moves through the world differently. And I discovered when I was a kid that the way that I kept myself upright more often than not, of course, I had more falls than the average bear, but the way that I kept myself upright was through my core. It was just the way that my body compensated for my legs being what they were. And so hearing that the horseback riding really does build the core muscles, it makes complete sense that it is in the therapy regimen of kids with CP. And then the dive, I mean, the diving, having to climb up on a diving board and get to the end of it. How did you handle that with balance? And do your legs get shaky when you're nervous? I know that's something that is really common with CP2. And what kind of dives did you do?
Yeah. So as many people that I've connected with CP, I have a video where I'm skipping on TikTok, and I learned at a later age how to skip. And so it was the same way with me with a lot of different things in gymnastics. I always wanted to learn how to do, a back handspring and a cartwheel. And I still to this day cannot cartwheel, like maybe a round off if you call it that. But I didn't have the agility, and I wanted to be a gymnast, but I just knew that that wasn't in the cards for me. So my mom actually said, why don't you try diving? Because she knew that's something I always wanted to do. So with my left side being my stronger side, I would jump off the board mainly with my left. So you do the hurdle, which is, your 1 foot, and then you land on two, and that's how you throw the dive.
Okay.
So I just learned to pivot to my left side because that was my stronger side. And it is interesting because I can say I did a good job growing up and getting through, and I was able to compete, but I was never a state ranked diver. But it was just amazing to be able to compete. My freshman year, I did a few meets, and it was so fulfilling. And I can honestly say I wish that there was more opportunity to move my body that way. I found it now through dance, but there's something about getting on a diving board and doing a double. And you throw yourself forward and you're flipping twice through the air. You don't know where you're going to land. I mean, the amount of flops I had throughout. But it was honestly just one of the best experiences that I had for myself, because with diving, I really learned that, yes, I have to pivot to try a lot of different things, but it doesn't mean that I still can't do something that would fulfill me in a way I thought it would. So I always thought I wanted to be, a professional gymnast, ballet dancer. And again, that's just not something that was going to happen for me. So I was able to just pivot and try something that was as fulfilling. And still to this day, it's one of my favorite sports that I've ever competed in. And I would love to find a way as I age to maybe coach or just be involved in the sport again. Because I just love women to know in general that even if they don't think they can push themselves to do these things physically, that you never know what you're made of until you try.
That's true. I really like your closing statement on that answer. I used to jump off diving boards at camp at a certain point, and then at a certain point I said, I don't trust myself to do this. I'm not going to do it anymore. But swimming was always the best feeling. It felt like I didn't have CP in the water. It kind of took all those forces away. So I understand really being attached to that piece. And I was fascinated by gymnasts and ice skaters when I was younger, probably because I knew that was something I could not at all do. And I was, how are they hurling themselves in the air to do all of
Yeah.
this, twisting and flipping and twirling? And then the third thing you brought up when you were talking about yourself is that you really like cooking. So does your CP affect your fine motor skills with with your weaker side? And does that affect the way that you meal prep or cook in your home?
Yeah. So the biggest thing for me that I've noticed is my left side is my strength. And I think I probably should have written lefty too, but I'm lucky that I was actually taught to write righty because I think that it did help me with those motor skills. I mean, still to this day, I don't hold a pen or a pencil right. I write basically straight up and down. And so it's just, one of those things that's normal to me. But I do notice that for stability wise, I always make sure that my left is there. I pick up pots and pans with my left hand. I mean, if I'm reaching for something, it's always on the left side. And something that I do just normally standing is I lean on my left. So
Mhm.
my right leg, I'm cooking, I'm just standing, and all of a sudden I'm wondering why one leg just is absolutely in pain. And it's because I haven't even used my right leg. I haven't engaged it. And it's so hard to just consciously think of standing on 2 feet because
Yes.
my body, it's like, oh, well, this is your weaker side. Let me just lean to the left. And it's something that's normal. But when I am cooking, I'm telling myself, okay, stand on 2 feet. Or like if I start to move around and then I wash the dishes and I do it again, I try to keep that conscious reminder in my brain.
It is really a conscious thing. And I can say, so you have hemiplegia, so it affects your right side. I have diplegia, which affects both of my legs, but not my arms. CP wise, anyway, everything is connected, as we both know.
Yeah.
But my left side is also my stronger side. And I will also lean heavily on that side and have the exact same experience of why, why does my left foot hurt? Why does my left leg hurt? And it's because I'm just favoring it because I trust it way more than the other side. And it's not like I can't do anything on the other side, but it has caused me to fall and cause balance issues so often that I'm like, I don't trust you. I'm gonna lean to the left. So when you're cooking, you talk sort of about the balance piece of it. Do you have any adaptations for when you're cutting or chopping or dicing? Or are you all set with that? I know there's like different devices on the market. I've seen different people post about choppers and other kinds of rocker cutters. So I was curious if you used any of those devices or had any
Yeah.
thoughts
So
on that.
with the fine motor skills for my hands, typically that's okay. I mean, as far as bringing in groceries, I will line up an entire arm of groceries on my left and carry the lightest bag on my right. And it's those interesting things. So I really would be interested to see if there's something different, but like my left side is that stability. So, it's holding the onion so my right side can chop and my left side will hold it down and make sure that I can. So it's
Yeah.
something interesting. And I've had this conversation with you and many other people, just things that we do that are the norm for us that
Mhm.
might not be for other people. And sometimes once you start to talk to people about them, it just like opens it up to say, oh, hey, like that actually might be because of my CP. And then it kind of teaches you to research and learn more.
Yeah, and when non-disabled folks or just people without CPs see us, they might think, "Oh, oh my goodness, you need help with that." Sometimes I do need help, and sometimes it's just the way that I'm adapting. I assume you might have some similar experiences too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially growing up, just making sure that I could take the stamina throughout the day with certain things. And I can tell you that sometimes I didn't sit down when I needed to just because I didn't think that I could. But as we've talked about, I've learned the most about my CP in the past few years about myself. And I think that's definitely because I've aged and I want to make sure that as I age, I can grow up and be healthy. I always knew that it was a part of my life. I always knew that I was different from a young age. But I really started to feel empowered to take it on and handle it versus
Mhm.
kind of pushing it to the side and saying, that's just how it is. I'll be fine. But by advocating for myself and to say, okay, I really need to find better healthcare for myself. What else can I do for myself to make sure that I have mobility? It's opened up just so many doors, like finding the CPARF too, and connecting with people to learn more because like longevity wise, I'll just be able to be that much healthier.
Yeah, it's growing up and turning into an adult with CP is a wild ride, and each decade brings new and different things as you go along. So the sooner you can kind of take the reins of your medical care and research into whatever works for you, the better. And you've done that. And it's something that we really promote here at CPARP too, and why we do the research that we do across the lifespan as well. Sort of piggybacking on that, you talked about how you really started your discovery of this more as an adult, but what was the best thing that your parents did to support you, whether it was when you were younger or even within the last few years as you've kind of shifted your perspective a little bit?
So growing up, which was really great, was they found a specialist at Connecticut Children's Hospital. And I can honestly say that Connecticut Children's was such a blessing for me. I had a great orthopedic. And so we knew that I had to have foot reconstructive surgery and also to lengthen my Achilles tendon. And so to prep for the surgery when I was in high school, my dad every week was bringing me to physical therapy, whether it be once or twice a week. And it was going to be, a 45-minute drive each way, because we would drive, basically halfway across the state to get to, my special PT. And so I can't just thank them enough for doing that for me. And from that too, I was supposed to have this surgery in high school. And it was something that I was so nervous to do that I actually ended up not going through with it when I was in high school. And I ended up having it in college. And again, I'm so thankful that I had them because they would pick me up from school every weekend after just being so exhausted. I was in a cast for over 3 months. And then a boot for about 3 months. And this was a surgery they told me I would take 2 months to heal from.
Nope.
So thank God I didn't get it done in high school because that would have ruined a whole year for me. So it was one of those moments where I was like, okay, I did well for myself by, not having it. And so, just having that experience and having them support me, pick up my scooter and help me get around, it was really humbling and just to learn like everything that I had and the support system I had from them. They knew that I had to get this done, but they were letting me choose on my own terms, which was really beneficial for me.
The autonomy and sense of control in a disabled life is especially important because so much of the time it feels like things are being done to us and that we don't have a choice, especially as kids when you're having different kinds of therapies and interventions. And so when you get to the age where you can really make the decision, it's great. I can also say that if I had to make a decision to have surgery in college, it would have been really hard. And I would have almost wished that I was a kid so that I didn't have to make the decision. It's much harder to make decisions like that when you're going to upend your life for some period of time, and that maybe a doctor will say it's going to take 2 months and it takes way more than you expected, and you still have to go on either with your school or your work as you're doing it. So kudos to you for making that decision as a college student, because that's also, putting a really fun part of life on hold for something that's not fun. And also to your parents for supporting you in that way. And sort of this relates to that as well. What would you say is your earliest advocacy story?
Yeah, so I would definitely say that it was that day that I was supposed to have that surgery. And just to go into detail a little bit more, so I actually fainted in the elevator. I was so nervous. And I know so many people are nervous to have, different medical procedures. I'm the same way with a cavity. It could be a very small thing or large. But when I woke up, I told my mom, I said, I just don't think it's the time. Something was telling me. And throughout growing up, I've always had a strong voice. But like you said, sometimes people are guiding you and you just think that it's the right way, that you should listen to what they're saying. And you kind of take a back seat in your life. And then you start to realize that that's not the way that it has to be, and you can have a voice. So that really started to lead me into, thinking of different avenues to make me healthy and find ways that, I could put this off, because it wasn't something that needed to be done right then. And I know, in some situations, we have to get over the fear if it is something that's dire and you have to do right away. But I think just planning and prepping yourself mentally for a major life change like that, I wasn't ready yet. And I'm so glad that I told myself that I wasn't, because I don't think I would have ended my high school career on such a high note. I loved high school more than college. And I know that a lot of people can't say that, but I don't think that I would have if I put myself through that. And mentally, the battle and support system that I had from just everyone in my college community, it made it so much better.
That makes complete sense. The closest story I have to that, it just reminded me that I once worried myself sick out of a surgery. I still had to have it, but back in the day, you had to have pre-op a week before your surgery. And I worried myself into a cold, and they said, we're going to delay this. Do you know how excited I was to just delay it? But I thought I canceled it in my young kid brain. And to have had the ability, as an older person, to say, you know what, clearly my body is telling me this is not the right time, and I will put a pin in this, but I will do it, and I will take care of myself. That's a really powerful moment for sure.
Definitely. And as we've talked about in the past too, just growing up and figuring out our best way of mobility and making sure we work out and go to physical therapy or ride the stationary bike, it continues. And so I kind of look back on those moments and I say, okay, I know what I did was right then, and I have to keep showing up for that 14-year-old to make sure that, I'm still doing the best things for myself, even if I don't want to. It does make a difference.
Yes, it certainly does. And you talked about that advocacy story. Is that the advocacy story that resonates the most deeply with you, or is there another one that you'd be open and willing to share?
Yeah, so definitely through a time in my life. So I had a long-term boyfriend, and we ended things when I graduated college, and I really started to grow, and I was doing my own business, and I was really starting to become my own person. So I kind of went through a total transformation of myself, and things that I wouldn't have stood up for before when I was in that situation, through high school, through college. I, then started to advocate for myself a lot more, especially in business. And, it's public speaking and kind of being in the spotlight has never been something that I've been that afraid of. I mean, I would MC our town hall meetings at my elementary school.
Love it.
Yeah. And so it's little things like that I wasn't, but sometimes just with the people that meant the most to me, or in business situations, I just wouldn't speak up. And so to start to be able to do that actually led me into being like, I am the person that's driving this car of my life. I'm not somebody in the passenger seat. I'm not in the back seat. And then through COVID, honestly, turning myself into that person, it kept me resilient through. And that's when I found, a new opportunity with the job that I am now, was because I said, I don't think I'm growing anymore, and I want to see what's out there. So I start to put myself in these uncomfortable situations where previously I would just ride them out. And so, whether it be in your personal life or something that you're dealing with an inner battle with yourself, sometimes just by getting over those obstacles and making yourself break out of comfortability really just makes the biggest change in your life.
I completely understand and relate to that. Honestly, I think you diving off the diving board is also dovetails nicely with that. You've talked a lot about different things that you've achieved over the years, but what of those things are you the most proud of?
That's honestly a tough question. And I was really thinking about this. And I can just say, again, just to the growth that I've had as a person, because in this past year, especially, just starting to be able to realize where I want to go and who I want to impact. So I've really started to create content for me. And I know that everybody on social media always wants, the best feed, the filter, they want everybody to see their life through this certain lens. And that's something that I'm really proud of that I changed in myself, because, my Instagram used to be that way. I used to be an influencer promoting, and, everything looked perfect, but I never felt fulfilled in actually what I was saying. And I didn't feel like I was being authentic to myself. So I really started to change, and it's just helped me grow so much. So, I mean, I think everybody thinks of their 20s as when they've made it, but I'm sure, as you and I know, once you start to get into your 20s, you realize, no, I still don't have it figured out. And like, that's okay.
Yes.
But now you have to start to have this vision of where you want to go in many aspects of your life.
Yeah, I definitely thought in part of my 20s that I had things figured out, and then I was rudely awakened that I did not have things figured out. And then you just have to refigure things out. But that happens throughout life.
Yeah.
You just gather and accumulate experience to help guide whatever decision you make next. And so you have a little bit less experience, or most people have less experience in their 20s, and you have more in your 30s and more in your 40s, et cetera. But I think it's really fantastic that you placed a high value on authenticity, because I'm sure that resonates with the people who are in your audience on Instagram and elsewhere. Authenticity attracts authenticity, and is really crucial in the world, to have authentic relationships, conversations, and just stories being shared, because it helps people realize that they're not alone. So I applaud you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you. And I know it's been just such a journey to, go from being that person that, that highlight reel, to really just starting to share my story. And I had lost over probably 1,000 followers from when I really
Wow.
started to change. But what's so interesting is now, I almost have 3,000 brand new people who I've connected with through TikTok. So, it doesn't have to always just be your story. But, if it's something that you're passionate about and something that you're growing, that's where people resonate. So, I've had so many people reach out and say, I don't know how to share my story with CP, but maybe you want to make content about cooking or fitness, and then, like you were saying, bring it back to who you are. So share those tidbits, and really start to just help people get to know who you are, because I always say people join people, and at the end
Yes.
of the day, like, that's why they stay. And I mean, just like when I've connected with you and Katie,
Mhm.
it just fueled me to do so much more with the Sea Park too. So, I just want people to keep joining that and being a part of the community, because I think it'll make such a big difference. And I want to just keep growing it and giving people more resources, not only through CP, but also, so many people living with invisible disabilities, and who are just young women trying to navigate the world. Because let's be honest, a young woman with a disability or not, it's very tough out there in the real world. And so, to just be there as someone to motivate them, I think would just be amazing. And I want to be that person that I wish I had when I was 18.
That connects to so many other things I wanted to ask you. We also have someone from TikTok that asked a question, and I see you, and I will bring that question up in a little bit. But the last thing you said also leads right into a question I was going to ask you later, but it makes sense to ask now, which is, can you share some of your perspective around living with a disability that's often invisible? So it's not always invisible, right? But it's invisible depending on the situation that you're in.
Yeah, and that can be hard sometimes, because I think sometimes people don't necessarily want to share. So if people ask me why I was limping growing up, I would just say, oh, I tripped, or oh, I have a tightened Achilles tendon. I was 6 years old. I didn't know how to explain, so I wasn't trying to open that up. And I was playing tennis a few weeks ago. I was subbing for my dad's tennis league, and one of the guys was like, oh, like, you're already limping, like we already tired you out. And I said, well, actually, no, I have cerebral palsy. And just to say, I mean, you could have heard a pin drop, right?
No,
I wasn't saying, I was just saying it to be like, well, this is why I'm limping. And I would have never just brought that up. I would wear shoes that would hide the fact that you could tell that my gait was different, or, heels. I have a few pairs of heels. I'll never be able to walk in them, but I bought them anyway. And so, it's just things like that I would hide kind of who I was. But sometimes it can be tough, because you do have to kind of advocate for yourself more in certain situations. with jobs in the past. I've had a few in retail where you do have to stand, and I would try to sit on the counter or sit on the retail bench to give
Or
myself
lean a little bit of the weight on it, right? That like
yes, exactly.
backwards leaning.
And so, sometimes it's like, well, I just need this break for myself. And that's taken me a long time to just bring up for myself too, is to just say, this is what my body needs. And 27 years. So I wouldn't have told anybody that. Maybe I would do things that I wouldn't say to people, but now I'm more vocal about it, just because you don't know what other people are going through in their life. So if they can relate and say, oh, yeah, I know Alexa has CP, so maybe this person, needs a break because of their physical disability. And it opens up a lens to say it's a spectrum, and many people can be impacted in different ways. So just keep your mind open versus seeing it just through one lens.
It's the physical version of you don't know what someone's going through. So just assume they might be going through something,
Yeah.
because if I'm sitting on a subway, which I haven't done in a while, but if I'm sitting on a subway, unless you're looking closely at my internally rotated knees, there's no reason in your mind why I wouldn't get up for a pregnant person that comes onto the train or an elderly person that comes onto the train. But I'm not about to do that, because if I get up and the train is delayed, I can't stand for the hour, and then I have lost my seat. And so I've had people look at me, accusingly, like, I'm a young looking woman, what are you doing not getting up, that kind of thing. Then I've had the opposite, where mine is visible when I'm moving. So people see it from a mile away and will get up without me asking. And that might be something that you don't necessarily experience. Or maybe is that something that you experience when you're more tired?
Yeah. Yeah, the fatigue for me, and sometimes it's the chronic pain. So I'll have pain all the way into my neck, and it's stemming from my leg. So it's going into my hip, into my foot, and it's just something that's there all day. But again, you wouldn't see it, right? Because I'm just experiencing it. So it's, stretching, getting off from my desk. And I am lucky that I do work a remote job, because I'm able to, do some yoga midday, like even if it's 10 minutes, just stretching, moving my body. And I'm super lucky because my partner is so supportive, and he helps me stretch and massage. And, he promotes me to go to the chiropractor and get massages, pedicures, and things that will just help that pain management. Because sometimes it's so normal for you to be in pain that you just don't necessarily want to deal with it. But there are some days, I've been traveling a lot and doing a lot. And a few weeks ago, my body just kind of said, enough, you need a break. And I did honor that. And I didn't end up going on a short trip that I was supposed to be on, because I was physically and just, I had a cold and everything. My body was just so tired. It was just hard to get out of bed. And so just honoring your limits, even if other people don't see them, but just trying to show who you are, I think makes a really big impact.
We have to be masters at adaptation. I say that all the time, but also masters of setting and keeping a boundary, and putting boundaries around our energy levels is incredibly important, because if we don't take care of that, then we won't be the best version of ourselves for people when we do have the energy to do so. Like, we can be the best version of ourselves as long as we're able to take care of ourselves and, notice and follow when our energy is too low to keep doing something.
Yeah.
And hopefully it's before you get the cold.
Yes.
Like, that's probably a learning experience, that maybe the next time there's one less thing, or you block other time out before, but you kind of have to learn the lesson the hard and sneezy way of getting a cold from running around and doing a lot of things.
And, learning too that people with CP, with many different things that we do with, as far as movement, we're using on average 3 times more energy than the normal person. And so, sleep is so important, and getting into a good schedule and making sure, I mean, this is something that I've been learning too, is making sure that, you have vitamins and minerals and things that are going to help. So your vitamin D, your vitamin C, your calcium. So it just keeps up your stamina. And again, that longevity in life, we want to make sure that we have healthy bones and muscles.
Yeah, Yes, we definitely want to make sure that we have healthy bones if we have disabilities that cause us to fall. So that is certainly something to just keep an eye on, and something that's come up in past webinars is the idea that perhaps people with CP might need to see bone specialists. Would be endocrinologists actually look at bone strength, and I know that sometimes people with CP kind of get medical fatigue or have had not so great medical experiences in their youth, that then when they're adults, it turns them off from seeking the care that they need because it was just so ableist or so frustrating or so painful. And we have to be a little bit more vigilant. And it goes back to the first thing we were discussing about self-advocacy and really looking at it as being quarterbacks of our own care, and like the CEO of our own care. And if you kind of look at it in that way, and that it's applying some control to yourself, that's saying, I'm going to take this by the reins, and that means I need to look up a specialist for this to make sure that my bones are okay, or that my kidneys are okay, or that my muscles are okay, what have you. And people learn this at different paces. So you learn this in your 20s, some people learn this in their 30s, some people, things were so different decades ago. If people grew up without the Americans with Disabilities Act, then they probably had even more frustrating experiences. And I can completely understand why they would just want to, kind of shun going to additional CP related doctors. Or people have looked at CP as it's just this muscular disability, but it really does affect a lot of different things because it's neurological. So it's actually in your brain. And some of the research that we're looking at and funding now, goes into that, and other research that's being done that we're not necessarily funding, but out there in the world, looking at the role of inflammation. There's just so much really that we don't know about CP, which energizes me in this role, and also just frustrates me that we've gotten to this point when CP was identified in the late 1800s, that we still don't know so much. But the thing that is really, really reassuring is that there are people looking into that now, that we are rightfully so looking at what's happening for children with CP, but understanding that of course it's a brain injury, so it is a lifelong disability, and perhaps we should study different effects and different things we can do for the people after they're 18 or 21 or fall off the care cliff. So
and that was scary. That was so scary for me to leave such a great support system. And, I call the office back once I'm 22 and they're like, oh, here are some podiatrists, not specialists in cerebral palsy. And it's like, I didn't have anywhere to graduate to.
Right.
So it was so scary because now you're alone. You had this system of doctors who you could rely on as a kid. And not that I loved it growing up, but I realized, especially in college, to say, okay, these are people who are supporting me and are helping me.
Right.
And so and our parents didn't have the internet.
No, they did not.
Without Google, I wouldn't have, found the doctor that I have now, and have the resources. So to say, I have to have surgery on my hip, and so to have recommended doctors, or even for him to say, don't get hip surgery yet, but you need this. So we're going to figure out when, pain management wise, how to maintain your hip so you don't need a hip replacement too early. All of these things I wouldn't have known. So imagine I'm in my 30s and I need a hip replacement, but because I advocated and I got there. And so just keep researching and looking. And if you don't, I called a few offices, and I actually went to a podiatrist who didn't understand CP and put me in a boot because he thought I had stress fractures in my foot because it was swelling. So that was the level he just didn't understand. And so if I had stayed with him, I would have said, okay, I just have stress fractures. I'm going to stay in a boot for 4 weeks. But that's kind of when I had those questions to say, is he out for my best interest?
Right.
Probably not. He's probably doing his best, but I need to figure out who the best is for me.
Yeah. And we're lucky that we live either in or near a city where there are people who can give us this care. And I recognize that there are so many places across the country that don't have those care networks, don't have the protocols, don't have the expertise. And one of the things that we've expanded our mission from just research to include innovation and implementation. And implementation basically means taking research that's been proven and making sure that it applies to you, whether you're in a city, a suburb, an exurb, a rural area, so that you can get the same care no matter what. And it's a long process. It's something that we're starting and we're really proud to be working on, but it's so, so necessary because people that don't live in or near New York City should still have access to someone with the expertise that we have access to. Someone in the chat brought up when we were talking about the amount of physical energy and the toll that CP takes on physical energy, they said, and emotional energy too. And I agree with that and want to add something else that I learned at a CP conference 3 years ago, which is when I say that walking takes this physical energy, a physical therapist said to me, it's mental energy that it's taking you to walk is also physical energy. Energy is energy. And I don't know why it took me till my late 30s to hear and understand that, but energy is energy. You kind of, if you think back to college, if you were doing an all-nighter with a paper, that makes sense. But I've just always so much focused on the physical energy that CP takes and not the side where it's I'm walking down a sidewalk and I'm dodging a person on their smartphone or a dog leash or like something on the ground I don't want to step on or a crack or a slope or a brick or whatever else. That's taking physical energy. So that is an additional toll. And then the emotional side of it with society sort of being inaccessible and where we have to adapt. Like I'm a proud adapter, but it takes energy as well. Do you have other thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially when I learned the different levels that I had as far as accessibility. I mean, sometimes in public places there isn't anywhere to sit.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know that they technically do that on purpose for many reasons. But you know, if you need that break, I mean, it's just tough. And you've experienced that, as you had said. And then when I was physically in a scooter for 3 months, none of the handicap doors would work at school. So I would press the button and nothing would happen and everybody's going into class and I was invisible to that. And so that's when I really realized that accessibility on so many levels isn't accessible for all. And sometimes people have the best intentions with accessibility, but it doesn't always come through for the people that actually need it. So I think, you know, actually connecting with people and learning about accessibility is the biggest thing that we'll need to start to get to. I mean, I know when, you know, New York City was built, it was not thought about accessibility. So it's tough for that to get there. And I mean, small towns in Connecticut don't have the budget for the best accessibility. That's the reality. But really starting to make an impact. And it could be that one person in the community that starts to pave the way for everybody else. So we just have to keep doing that. And like I said, with our stories, it's not just a story that you're putting out there, even if it reaches one person, and it could be that one person, you know, in the governor's office that says, okay, we need X amount of funding to help this. And you never know just by who you connect with, how it could just impact others' lives too.
Connection is a really excellent point. And because you really don't know, you're in one spot and you can't see the concentric circles around yourself to see where you might be rippling out and helping other people. And just one other point to highlight is what's accessibility for us. Like if I need somewhere to sit on a long walk is different than if someone is a wheelchair user and they need ramps. Ramps are helpful to me, but I can do stairs if there's a railing. But if there is nowhere to sit along the way, then to me, that's an inaccessible place. And then for people with other disabilities, either on top of CP or instead of CP, like visual accessibility and hearing accessibility are different from mobility accessibility. And then accessibility for fully invisible disabilities that are, you know, that affects people intellectually or cognitively, all different kinds of things that have to be taken into consideration. So we have about 15 minutes left, so I want to get to the questions that some people have asked. So Morgan from TikTok has a really fun question for you, which is, who would you want to play you in a biopic of your life?
Oh boy, that's a fun question.
I know, I wanted to kick off with that.
I know. Honestly, that's a tough one Because I mean, I feel like I would need to really just sit down and connect with people and see, who would be able to have that. One person who, I always love just, in the industry is Jennifer Lawrence. I think she's just really fun. And she's just like herself. But I think that so many women could resonate and play me well. And so, like I said, I think we'd have to chat and see. But I've never thought of that, and I would love to go into that more.
Yeah, and it brings up like a interesting side question of would it be an able-bodied or a non-disabled person, or would we find someone that people don't really know but has either your disability or similar disability to you and just hasn't been able to succeed because people think there are no disabled roles or that they can cast
Yeah.
a non-disabled person in a disabled role.
And typically they don't pull that off well. And so that's why I
Right.
think I would love to, because even if it isn't a physical disability, just connecting with someone and hearing what they've been through in life, they might be able to resonate on some level of just understanding that. And so I think at least with me, just trying to help people understand how my CP affects me. I mean, it's not something, like we said, every day you can see. But once you really show someone, you can't wiggle your toes, you don't have great movement in your foot, it really starts to hit them to say, and I don't even notice. And she still does that. And so,
Right.
really that's when it comes down to just getting to know people, because you start to learn, wow, they really have done so much to overcome and get to where they are today.
That is true. So then there are two other questions in here that are more directly related to the things you can accomplish with your CP. Someone asked, do you find fine motor skill tasks can sometimes take you longer than other types of tasks?
Yeah, definitely. So with certain things, as far as going up onto a point with my toe, or getting my foot into a flip-flop. I mean, that's honestly the
You
worst.
dare to wear flip-flops. Good for
Yeah, which
you.
I've been advised not to, but here we are. And so, if I lose my foot out of a flip-flop and I don't physically bend down and put it on, my foot does not have that. And I remember going to physical therapy and them trying to fine-tune that. So a towel would be on the floor. Grab the towel with your toes and pull the towel.
Well, toes don't really do this. Can't
No,
do
and
it.
it was one of the most frustrating things that I started to pick up with myself. It's like, why can't I just do this? I probably will never be able to, but it did really teach me that, if I point my foot and I'm really working at it with probably 10 times the energy as my left side, I still don't have this mobility, but I can point my foot. So it's those things like that where it is that adjustment. So it's not perfect, but when I'm doing ballet, I don't look like the other dancers. My foot is mainly always in flexion. It doesn't do a lot of pointing, but if we are doing things in a slower motion, I will take that time to push myself to get there, because I think it makes a big difference. So, and it's interesting to kind of have this two sides of myself, because one side handles it so well. And sometimes my brain is saying, no, your right side's doing the same thing. It is not. It's not. And so it's really interesting to see that how your brain just communicates with the rest of your body, because my brain's still sending. That's what I always tell people with CP. My brain is sending the same message to both legs, but my right leg it's not computing. And so that's like the difference, and it never will. But there are things that we can do to make sure that you can get some sense of mobility or increase your strength, just to make sure that you can still do the tasks that you have been for most of your life.
Yeah, that inner self-perception versus what it looks like on the outside is wild. I liken it. I figured this out a year or two ago and shared it somewhere, that no one likes to hear their recorded voice because it doesn't sound like what their voice sounds like in their head. And so in my head, I know that I'm walking differently, but it does not feel like it's the amount of different that it actually is when I see it in a mirror. There's a disconnect there. And so it's probably a similar thing where your brain is like, yes, the right side's totally doing what you think it's doing, then you look and it is not doing that. Not doing that at all.
Yep, I know.
And then one more question about movement was, can you talk about spin cycling and biking with CP? I
Yeah,
cannot get on a spin bike, so kudos to you if you do that.
yeah. So I actually bought the Soul Cycle at home bike through COVID. And I mean, the classes are, I don't think for the average human that easy. But what I love about the bike is it's that low impact. So you can create your workout, you can put on a playlist, and you don't need to be doing the crazy jumps and choreography, but even if you're just on there pedaling and doing the miles, I tried this month to get my 133 miles, but I'm at 83-ish. But I think that that's something that I found that was a great workout. So I typically start my workouts where I push myself as much as I can, and then I do seated for the rest of the ride.
Okay.
But I think the great part about having an instructor, whether it be virtual or you're watching a replay, is that sometimes them doing it like pushes me to do a little bit more. Maybe it's less resistance, but I want to keep up and push myself. Such a great low impact workout. So I spin is if you can, and there are so many different bikes too. So a regular spin like a Peloton bike, but there's also more adaptive bikes that I used in PT. And in college, that's when I found spin, because I was able to just slide my sneaker in and go. But I love feeling like I really can move my body that fast. I can't run. It's awful for me. I don't do long distances.
Yeah, your hip would not like you too much if you ran.
No, not my hip nor my foot. So it's like, it's that space where I can really move my body, because nowhere else would I push myself 5 or 6 miles. There's no way I would in a workout. And it's so great. So yeah, I definitely recommend it for those who can.
And when I do quote unquote biking, it's recumbent biking. So it's really a chair and then you're pedaling, because going back to the idea of the mental energy that CP takes out of you, I have to concentrate to sit on a seat on a bike. So if I'm on a recumbent bike, that's just a chair like the one I'm sitting in, and then I'm pedaling and there's straps on the pedals, because there absolutely needs to be straps on the pedals for my feet to stay there, then I can do a lot. I did at a different charity at an event, 3 45-minute cycling rounds, and then I was like, why did I do that? Because for the next week my legs rebelled. But yeah, there's just different ways to move yourself, and if you're someone who doesn't like want to move a ton because your CP takes energy out of you, maybe take it slow and look into small ways that you can move just a little bit more, and remember that you're going at your own pace and what works for you. And it's really hard, but don't look at other people when you're doing those things, because you're on your own path and on your own timeline. And I think that kind of circles back to everything that we've talked about today. So before I sort of formally say my goodbyes, is there anything else, Alexa, that you wanted to share with everyone here today?
Yeah, well, I'm just so glad that we had this great conversation, Jocelyn. And I think you just hit the nail on the head with that last point, that we are on our own journeys. And because we have such a large spectrum, I think, we can be each other's cheerleaders. But something that, I can handle with having a more mild case of cerebral palsy, I never want somebody to feel like their body isn't enough because they can't do that. And I love the stories that I see to say, I wasn't able to, cycle, but I had an under the desk bike pedaler. And I do that for myself when I'm watching TV, or, for people like you to say, I swim. And so, there's so many adaptive measures. And of course, 2 different outlets that you can find. I mean, theater, painting, and there's so many, and people reach out to say, I found my hobby and I pushed myself. So I just want to tell everybody to just keep writing your own stories and being beautifully who you are, because it doesn't necessarily mean you can't look left and right all the time. It's great to have the support of everybody, and to see what everybody's up to, but it doesn't make you any less beautiful than you are. And I always want people to feel that way, that they do have a story, they do have a voice, and whatever capacity they want to share it, it's valid.
That resonated with me personally, so I deeply appreciate it and appreciate you taking all this time out to share your story with everybody and be so open and vulnerable. I know it's a busy time for you. There's lots going on, and it's a busy time for us here too. If you didn't know, our podcast on disability innovation is launching this Friday. So we'd love for anyone here or listening to this to take a listen to the podcast, to subscribe and review it. It's called Changing What's Possible. And our next webinar will be on Disability Pride Day, which is July 26th. So sign up for our mailing list and keep an eye on our social platforms for more information on that and more things to come. And we'll post this online within a week or so, and I will send the link out to everybody who signed up for this webinar. And I will also go ahead and send the link to our podcast and the link to register for our next webinar so that everyone can stay in the know. But if you sign up for our mailing list, then you'll never miss details. And I appreciate everyone taking time out of their evening to join us tonight. Have a great rest of your day.